our speaker setup. So this evening's speaker is where am I at here? Jennifer Schneiderman of the Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance. Um, she works with the Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance. She is a dedicated volunteer there. She earned her master's in wildlife ecology from UW-Madison and has worked as a conservation technician with the Sauk County Land Resources and Environment. Her work focuses on restoring habitats that benefit both wildlife and people. And outside of work, Jenn enjoys birding, hiking, gardening, and a variety of other nerdy pursuits. So with that, let's welcome Jenn on up and tell us about American Kestrels.
So you can use the right and left arrows to go back and forth.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you so much.
You got it.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for having me here. Sorry about the delay. There were 2 accidents on my drive, so my commute turned into a little bit longer than I anticipated it. But yeah, so thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Again, my name is Jenn Schneiderman. Oh, the camera. Oh, sorry about that for the folks online. Hopefully you can see my face now.
Just do a little bit more.
A little bit more. Okay. I'm quite short, but okay. But yeah, so my name is Jenn Schneiderman. I got my master's degree in 2020, looking at, bald eagle and osprey relationships. And yeah, I'm here today to talk to you all about kestrels. So first things first. Awesome. So I'm here as on behalf of Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, formerly known as Madison Audubon. They're a nonprofit that's been operating since 1935, so quite a long time in the state. And their mission is to protect and improve habitat for birds and other wildlife through land acquisition management, education, and advocacy. They're a nationally accredited land trust with 7 properties, most of which are open to the public. Probably one of the most well-known ones is Goose Pond. Sure, marshland birders always love going there. I love going there myself almost as much as I love coming here. So, but yeah, and they provide a lot of youth and community education, which is why I'm here talking to you all today. They do a lot of conservation advocacy at both local and state levels, and they provide a ton of habitat protection and resources for establishing habitat. Also, forgot to say, I'm pretty informal as a speaker, so if you have questions or want to interrupt, just go ahead and do so. I really love chatting about birds and with bird people, so we all speak the same language here. But first, I wanted to establish a little bit of place. So currently, we are standing on unceded land of the Ho-Chunk, Neoachi, Brothertown, and Fox tribes of the Wisconsin, with the driftless region being a little bit west of where we are right now. So we are currently looking at the phases of glaciation in Wisconsin. As you can see, this section to the easternmost part of the state is the most recently glaciated region of the state. So it was covered maybe at least once, maybe several times by glaciers going as far back, too far back, we can't really tell. But we sort of abut or are right next to the driftless region, which is known for its prairies. And this map was done by the Wisconsin Geological and National Survey. Oh, can I minimize? Oh, I can. Haha. I got it. Got it. All right. Sorry. Courtesy of the Wisconsin Geological and Natural History Survey. My bad. That's why we look at notes. But yeah. So we are in what is this ice shelf here. If we can see, there's like Lake Mills down here. We have Green Lake up here. And we are, of course, in Horicon, sort of. I'm sorry, I don't know my geography very well in the state. Northern Dodge County. Excellent. Thank you. I moved here 8 years ago. All right. So a defining feature of this area are prairies and grasslands, and even if not prairies and grasslands, open spaces generally. Prairies and grasslands provide habitat for dozens of birds, and they are characterized by having little snow brush or woody vegetation and very rich organic soils. I'm sure a lot of us have seen those images of prairie plant roots that can reach up to 14 to 20 feet deep. That is part of what made this area so productive for agriculture and is a driving force behind a lot of the land conversion that we've seen. I'm sure everybody in this room has seen, farmland expand over the years, maybe decrease a little bit closer to cities, but the expansion of farmland is very real, and it does threaten the habitat of kestrels. According to the World Wildlife Fund, the Great Plains, part of which we are a part of, lost 600,000 acres of grassland to row cropping in 2021 alone. So you can imagine at that pace, there's quite a lot of grassland that's being lost. We're going to start with some of the depressing stuff. I apologize for that in advance. Has anybody seen this graph or this image or heard of this study before? Seeing some nods. Okay. So this was a study done by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology about missing birds. So since 1970, we have lost approximately 2.9 billion birds. And that averages to about 25% of birds per clade have vanished. And clade is sort of like the grouping of birds that you would expect to see in a certain habitat type. So there's the clade of grassland birds, which has actually decreased. We've lost more than about 53% of grassland birds. For wetlands, we've seen a 13% gain in bird population, and this is largely due to protective habitat measures, things like waterfowl production areas, places like Horicon Marsh, places like Goose Pond. That is allowing for these birds to actually, increase their populations. But we are seeing a lot of habitat loss from grasslands, primarily due to agriculture, because again, those 14 to 20-foot roots provide a lot of nutrients for the soil and make it really prime farmland. So that habitat conversion is a driving factor of why we are losing grassland birds. Am I going too fast? Can everybody hear me online okay? Cool. So we're going to get into the American Kestrel now. They are a grassland obligate bird, which means they do need a large, expansive, open area in order to be able to survive and thrive. They are the smallest falcon in North America, with males being about 30% smaller than the females. And this is true across raptor species because the females have to be able to carry eggs. So they're about, on average, they're 30% bigger than males across all raptors, except for red-tailed hawks. And where we are, they migrate through the Mississippi Flyway. There are some distinguishing factors when you're looking at a kestrel to be able to distinguish them from male and female. The males obviously have slate gray on the fronts of their wings with black primary feathers and white spots along the edge. They have a black band just above sort of a buffy tip to their tails. And they also have spotted underparts that is mostly white, with maybe a little bit of like a rufous color towards the top of their breast. The females have rufous and brown tails, or backs and tails, and they have much more spotting on their wings. They also have streaked underparts, and depending on the age of the bird, it might have more of like a muddied sort of streaking versus like a very clear and delineated streaking on their belly and on their breast. But just like all falcons, they have the very charismatic, I think they're beautiful falcon tears just below their eye, and that classic hooked beak with a falcon tooth. But they are very small and quite feisty. So the migration pathways that we have in the States are along the Mississippi Flyway. And American kestrels during the breeding season, or during the wintering season, excuse me, during their winter will migrate all the way down to Patagonia, all the way down to sort of Cape Horn area of South America. They'll go all along both western and eastern coasts up into Central America. And then they will also, breed up as far north as Alaska into the northern parts of Canada. So very diverse habitat associations. But one of the things that all these places have in common are open spaces. There's a giant gap in sort of the northeastern part of South America. That's where the Amazon is. So very dense, very famous for being forested with a lot of trees and sort of closed in. And these birds really don't do well in that kind of environment. They need that broad space. Even in the mountains and high altitudes, they can be found. So that's really the factor that you see across their habitat associations is very open spaces. This is just an excerpt from a banding study in 2023 that was done by the Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance. So they banded an after hatch year female. The banding banding nomenclature has changed since this was published. So we no longer say after hatch year, we refer to them in cycles. So I don't know exactly how old this individual was, but it was past its first cycle or maybe like towards the end of its first cycle. And it was banded in Saxon Bog on June 14th in 2022. And it migrated all the way down to southern Mexico, maybe northern Guatemala. And then there were hatchier females. So they were, you know, within their first cycle, they were, you know, individuals that were banded in the box, in Minnesota as well. And they migrated all the way down to, again, southern Mexico. And it's really interesting because they actually, both individuals, you can see the flyway super clearly, like flying over, you know, part of that Gulf of Mexico on the western side there. So really cool. And these fast, small little birds can migrate over water. And they'll do that in one go, which is just mind-blowing to me. They don't stop, they just keep going. Yeah, so for what's on the menu for a kestrel's diet, anything that you would expect to find in the grasslands, but surprisingly, a lot of their diet involves invertebrates. If anybody has watched the dragonfly migrations, you can actually find a lot of kestrels during that time period over the prairies because they will be hunting the dragonflies and they'll just like catch them in midair. They're very acrobatic as well. So they'll catch them, post up on a wire or a fence post, eat their fill, go out, catch some more. It's really quite astounding to watch, but they'll do that during the summer as well, with grasshoppers, larger invertebrates, making up 74% of their diet. Small mammals make up the next largest portion of their diet at 16%. So classic, you know, hunting techniques that we expect of these grassland birds, or they're sort of hovering. I've got a video of that next, actually. It's really cool. It blows my mind every time. Where they will hover over the grass, you know, sort of triangulate their prey and dive. The next largest portion is birds at 9%. I don't recall when this study was done. I apologize, but yeah, birds make up a significant portion of their diet at 9%, and frogs and lizards make up a measly 1% of their diets. So not as much as you would expect, but they also do have quite a range when they are breeding. So several miles is how much they'll forage from their nesting box or from their, you know, little tree cavity that they have in order to be able to provide food for their young. So this is that video of hunting behavior, and sometimes an ad plays, so I apologize if that happens. But
I'm Tom Tiffany.
Yep, there you go.
Say I'm too cliche. Well, I did grow up in a house.
All right, so this is one of the coolest things. Just like they have this little tiny gyroscope in their head that allows for them to move their bodies, like I think almost 90 degrees with their heads remaining in place. So they can sort of hover, watch their prey that they're hunting, especially for rodents. This is super important. And their body just sort of like moves around their head. It's sort of like keeping a camera steady on a gimbal. It's really an amazing adaptation and behavior that they have. And their eyes are also incredible. So that allows them to see like the tiniest bit of movement in the grasses so that they can then, you know, they stop, they hover, they triangulate. They're like, and because they're so small, it doesn't take that much energy for them to stay in place. Normally, that's a very exertion heavy activity for a bird of a much larger size. You don't really see red tails hovering too much, but you do see kestrels. Even harriers are like very famous for hovering as well. But yeah, they're just such cool animals. Oops, got mad at me. Alrighty, so nesting. So, kestrels are a cavity nesting bird. So while they do need open spaces in order to forage and in order to provide food for their young are actually kept inside of a cavity. They produce 4 to 5 eggs. Again, that female needs to be about 30% larger than the male to be able to produce those eggs and carry them while she is flying and hunting. That's part of why they will forage so far from their nest cavity is they have 4 or 5 chicks that they have to feed in addition to themselves and their mate as well. So they can forage quite a few miles from where their nest actually is in order to search for food. Both males and females will incubate the eggs. Incubation takes 26 to 32 days on average in Wisconsin, and nestlings are reliant for 21 to 38 days after hatching in Wisconsin. So really cool species. This is my call to action section of my presentation this evening. So this is what can you do to help? There are 3 main things that I like to tell people. One is creating habitat, whether that's in your yard or in your farm field, if anybody here is a farmer, or helping create habitat in parks, hosting a kestrel box if you have the capacity and the land to do so, and then volunteering your time. So we'll go through each of these. The first is creating habitat. So, and this can be done in a lot of ways, some of which I think people don't like. It took a while for me to come around to this, but agriculture and kestrels, agriculture can provide a lot of really good habitat for kestrels. They require open grasslands or like potentially savanna habitat. Savanna is less than 30% tree cover. So still a lot of open space, but some trees they can tolerate. And you can create habitat through a variety of techniques and uses. Parks is a great one. Cropland conversion to prairies is one of my specialties. So yeah, programs like CRP or through EQIP. Your county might also have cost share for some of these programs, whether at the federal or county or even state level. So if you're interested, I highly recommend reaching out to your land resources departments. Rotational grazing is one of the ones that took me a hot second to come around to. But in a study done up in Sauk County just this last year, there's a section of farmland that is about 3 miles of rotationally grazed pasture, pool season pasture, and it's really beautiful. It was more diverse than the parks that were just outside of the city limits, where you would imagine you would see more habitat, more diversity. So really it's that disturbance regime that a lot of these animals, a lot of these birds really find appealing. And that keeps the trees down, that really, helps keep the thatch where it should be so that the rodents and their food sources, like rodents and insects, all of those goodies, that's where that comes from. And then as part of the management of those areas, prescribed burning is always something that I advocate for. Has anybody been on or at least seen a prescribed fire? Okay, got some in the room. It's the season right now. So prescribed fire is, again, a disturbance regime, and it's something that folks have been using for millennia. The plants here are actually adapted to it, which is why it is so it's really helpful actually for a lot of our open areas, like our grasslands, our marshes. There's increasing evidence that forests are actually really tied with prescribed burning as well, looking at fire scars on trees. So it's a really useful tool, and it also creates a ton of habitat. And if anybody has burned before, I do recommend occasionally looking up and looking around, because you will see raptors waiting along the edges of the prescribed fire for whatever little critters are going to run out. It's kind of brutal, but it's really cool. Snakes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's an amazing tool. It is intimidating. I totally understand, but it's also addictive. So, this is more for like if you are in more of an urban setting, or if you have this in your barns. Rodenticides and limiting their use is something that really actually does help a ton for these birds, because of that bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Does everybody remember or heard those stories of DDT in like the 60s? Yep. So DDT was an insecticide that caused interfered with the calcium production on eggshells in a lot of raptors. And actually, when the raptors went to sit on their eggs and incubate them, they would just crush them and break them open. And that led to massive population declines. So thankfully, those species, the peregrine falcons, bald eagles, and ospreys, as well as some waterfowl, have really rebounded well in the intervening years. But rodenticide is another kind of chemical that does really accumulates in the systems of more than just those rodents. The rodents might eat it, but then the owls will eat those rodents, or the kestrels will eat those rodents, or the foxes, or the eagles, or the turkey vultures may feast on the carcasses. So a lot of these, we think that they're a one-time use. They're really not. They're multiple uses, and they persist in the environment because they persist in the animals. So limiting or eliminating rodenticides, it's counterintuitive too, but like eliminating rodenticides will actually increase your rodent population, which will attract things that will eat the rodents, which will then bring down your rodent population. So while you might see a temporary boon in rodents, it's attracting a lot of those predators that will then feast on them. Second thing is to host a nest box. So this is an example of a nest box that Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance has installed. You'll notice it has this little, or maybe not little, but, ooh, wrong. It has this metal sheath, I suppose, right here. That is a predator guard, specifically to prevent raccoons, those little buggers. My friend says they have human hands and the devil's mischief. And I really like that. I really like that phrase. But they will get into these nest boxes and actually eat the chicks. So having some sort of barrier to that will really help make this a habitat that these kestrels will want to return to nest year after year after year. And it has a box on top, and then it's two poles that are just sistered together and bolted. So if you choose to have a nest box through Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, they will provide you with the nest box as well as, instructions to help build one yourself. But it's not something for nothing. You have to monitor the nest box. So this is what's called an endoscope, what you see on the screen here. And it's a fancy word for GoPro on a stick. That's really tiny. But basically, it's a small camera that allows you to check on the nest box on the inside and see how those kestrels are doing without actively interfering with them. You're required to monitor your nest boxes once per week, and you just have to document what you see. Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance provides trainings on what you're expected to do and how you need to fill out the forms, and they're available to answer any questions you might have as well. Yep, so this disturbs the bird's lease and allows us to get an inside scoop on the nesting activities. So be prepared for some glamour shots. So this is a male kestrel sitting on some eggs, and I think this nest box had a total of 5 eggs and 5 chicks hatch. I don't know that these are all from the same nest box, just so you know. This could be a variety. This is just some of the best images that we have. But as you can see, that male is relatively unbothered, just incubating those eggs. Sometimes you get a little sometimes individuals might be slightly more alarmed than others. This female incubating those 5 eggs is a little bit more perturbed by the endoscope, I think, than that male was. But one of the other things you can see is the floor of that nest box has pine shavings in it. And that's really one of the things that is helpful for them. It provides a lot of insulation and keeps the heat evenly distributed across those eggs. Yet another wonderful glamour shot of a female just having a little bit of a drama moment here. Um, but pretty soon after those, 26-ish days, those eggs will hatch into 5 little fluffy chicks. They are very helpless and reliant. They cannot fly. They're just covered in down feathers. They're not precocial at all. Very reliant on their adults. And part of what Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance will do as they're monitoring is they will actually band all of the individuals that they can. The adults can be a little bit tricky to get sometimes, if they're out foraging and nobody's in the nest box, well, they're not going to come back if they see humans disturbing the nest. So may or may not get the adults, but we make every effort to band the chicks. This is how we are able to identify an individual and see some of the things that are recorded at the time of banding are the age of the bird. So in this case, this would be first cycle. And also the weight of the bird, just to make sure that the individuals are healthy and see how those weights might fluctuate over different latitudes. We compare a lot of the data with other places that ban kestrels and other kestrel projects across the United States. We also sex the individuals, and you can tell the sex of these birds pretty early. So that is a male on the left-hand side of the screen and a female on the right-hand side of the screen. And these are barely just primaries that are peeking out of their sheaths. But already when they are so young, you can distinguish the males from the females. So we sex the individuals and we give them an ID band so that we can track them. If there's another study that might be done, like those, that one that I showed you along the flyway, they also put a transmitter on the bird. So it's just like a little backpack harness with a very, very small GPS tracker in it and a tiny solar panel. It's very low weight. It has to be like 1% or less than the bird's body weight. And that transmits the bird's location to a data collection server, basically. But yeah, so that's the information that's collected at the time of banding. And yeah, the last thing I wanted to plug is just volunteering. I heard from the first part of your meeting, you all are already well on that train. There are a variety of ways you can volunteer if you're looking for additional opportunities. Seed collection events are often hosted by different parks or organizations. There are a lot of places in the area that also host prescribed burn either trainings or opportunities to volunteer on prescribed fires to help create and maintain that habitat. You can do outreach and education events like what I'm doing here this evening. And you can participate in community science by things like hosting a nest box or participating in a Christmas bird count. Or the May big day that's coming up in just a few weeks. So that's what I have for you this evening. I realized I'm a fast talker. So if you want me to go back or answer any questions, I'm more than happy to. Yeah. Yeah.
Cabinet boxes.
Yeah.
For years. And one of the preferred after the rain storm.
Yeah.
I had video camera in the box.
Yeah.
So you can see what was going on. After a rainstorm, night crawlers were the #1 food source they grow.
Really?
Grab lots of driveway along the road, one right after another.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that is really cool. I would not have guessed that, but it makes sense. I mean, easy, yeah, and full of like nutrients and energy for those chicks that are growing. Yeah, very cool. Well, any other questions or comments or? Yeah.
What's their population right now?
So in some places, kestrels are actually doing really well. Wisconsin is a place where the kestrel population, we are seeing like a pretty stable population. In the places that see the greatest land conversion, we are seeing their populations decline. So places especially like Texas and Oklahoma, a lot of those places like from sort of central flyway down south, we are seeing quite a bit of decline. And part of that is also really scary just because, the kestrels that we see during the spring and summertime oh, I'm so sorry. Folks wanted me to repeat the question. The question was, how are kestrel populations doing right now? Thank you so much for reminding me to repeat. So the kestrels that we see in Wisconsin are not the same all year round. So there might be some individuals that we see during the spring and summertime into the fall that are breeding here, but their wintering grounds might be in those places like Texas and Oklahoma. So it's this really interesting thing where, you know, the mortality might have a lot of different causes, and will that start to affect the populations that we have here? Right now, it might be a little bit too early to say, but it, you know, it definitely, there's a possibility there. Which is part of why creating habitat and maintaining it is so vital for their populations, along the entirety of their life, of the habitats they use during their life. So, yeah, great question. Any others? Yeah. Yeah.
To the right where you go up.
Yeah.
All this, I always thought about there. It's a
Yeah, so the question for those online is, over by Goose Pond, there is a kestrel box, and is it the same pair of kestrels year after year that's returning there? I don't know about that specific pair, but raptors in general do have a lot of what's called site fidelity. So that means that if they're successful at breeding and rearing young in an area, in a spot, they are very likely to return to that spot year after year after year. If anybody has seen like the peregrine falcon live streams at all, those birds, it's really interesting actually, because they'll just get a new mate and bring them back to that old nesting area because they know that they're successful. And so it's now like the fourth pair essentially that has been there, but it's like because one of them perished and then got a new mate, and then the new mate came, and then the other one perished and got a new mate. And so it's kind of like this weird like handing off of a nest site. I would suspect that those kestrels would be the same pair there year after year. I don't have that answer on hand right now, but great question. Yeah.
Life expectancy.
Great question. Life expectancy. Oh my gosh, I don't recall off the top of my head. That's a really good question. I should have remembered to look that up. But yeah, falcons, yeah.
I read somewhere 8 years, it's probably pretty old.
Yeah, that would make sense. Because they are sort of in this, because they're small enough to also be prey, that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, I think if I saw one that was more than 10, I would be very surprised in the wild. Yeah, great question. Yeah.
We have a coworker that has kestrels as well. And she has a single box, but there's some brown like over it. So what's how close can a box be? Or
Yeah.
is it like without sight, like you have it closer, but you can't see each other? Like, are there recommendations for that?
Yeah, great question. So it's recommended to place boxes at least a mile apart. Yep, a lot more than bluebirds, I know. Yeah, they do get incredibly territorial, and they will fight over a spot, especially if, you know, there's a pair that has been there for a few years. But yeah, the resource demand is just so high for them. And when you think about raptors, they also have, generally speaking, like a 30% success rate if they're going for a hunt. So, you know, it's a little bit more energetically demanding for them to hunt than it is for something like a bluebird, where you're more of an aerial insectivore. So because of that, we want to make sure that we're providing adequate habitat for foraging at the same time. So about a mile apart is what is recommended. Great question. Yeah.
We had a trip box like up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been success. But
Mhm.
one of the problems that we have is 1 year to start that.
Yeah.
Another year is food.
Yep.
So what is the
So the question is, what is the best deterrent for nest boxes for things like starlings and squirrels? Let me first ask you a clarifying question. Is it on a post or is it on a tree? It's on a power pole. Great question. Yeah, I wouldn't have any recommendations offhand for starlings. I know for bluebird boxes, you can put that starling guard on them, but these are much big. But the way that those birds fly is pretty different from the way that kestrels maneuver. So I'm not entirely sure that there's like an external guard for them that you could use. Um, One of the things you can do is just monitoring and seeing if if you're seeing starlings come in and out, you can remove that nest material that they've put in there, and with enough disturbance, they won't necessarily like try to come back. The other thing you can do is something called cupping, which is where you basically take a solo cup and you just like stick it in the hole during the non-breeding season. So after the kestrels have left, you make that an inaccessible spot. So the starlings aren't seeing that as a viable option. And then you can remove the cup once it's starting to like become breeding season for kestrels, because they will breed earlier than starlings. They'll start to incubate and lay their eggs a little bit earlier than starlings. So that's another strategy that you can do for them. For squirrels, again, that like metal sheeting, maybe just extending that a little bit farther down or a little bit farther up could be helpful, like above the nest box, I mean. That might be a strategy to help. I've not seen a ton of people that have done the squirrels, because a lot of the nest boxes that I personally monitor and that Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance monitors are on those poles that you can just put the little bit of metal sheeting on that part right underneath the nest box. So you could try it and see if it works to put it above it. I couldn't guarantee it at this point, but it might be something that would help, because I'm assuming that they would come down from the wires next. So great question. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, real quick.
Standing on a ladder, it didn't go high, big roots.
I'm sure it was thrilled to see you. Yep. All right. Yeah. Yeah, great question. So the question was, is there like a prime setup, like as far as direction or like you can see from the opening of the nest box? So they will typically what you want is something that is like east or northeast facing. And what's really recommended too is to have something in sight that it would be easy-ish for the young to fledge to. So whether that is like a fence line or maybe not like dense brush, but like an open sort of brush situation, just something so that the young, because they're very clumsy when they first exit the nest. They've got those long wings and those tiny bodies, so they're just a little unsteady in flight. So having something visible that they can fledge to is really important. And you can kind of eyeball it. There's nothing like hard and fast necessarily, but it's if you can eyeball and sort of track out like, okay, the opening is there and I can see them sort of like gliding easily to this one spot so that they can nest, so that they can fledge. You don't want it like right up close to the entrance at all, because again, they can get tangled pretty easily. So yeah, great question. Yeah.
They recommend putting artificial branches on the side of the box. It's that similar as well on the box, where they'll have something off to the side, like a quarter stone.
Yeah. For fledging specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Young branches, like getting around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the question was, is it good to have like artificial branches or something like pretty close to the end, something for the young to fledge to? I would not recommend that, specifically because of the squirrel and raccoon and rodent problem that you could encounter. I think I might sneeze, sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah, I would not recommend that. I would recommend instead trying to, you know, if you were to wanting to put something artificial out, I would say put it farther away than that. These are not like owls where they like branch as much either. They're kind of like they're cavity nesters. So when they're ready to go, they full on leave and full send out of the nest. They won't necessarily like have that precautionary like practice sort of hopping around and like fluttering their wings. That's much more of an adaptation that we see in forest environments. And these are not necessarily a bird you would expect to see in the forest. So, but great question. I do know that those have a lot of success with like some of the northern saw-whet owl boxes and some of the like, yeah, smaller owl species, especially, and you'll see them on, you know, larger owl species too. Actually, now that I think about it, barred owls will also have the have branching, hopping out and all that kind of stuff, but not necessarily our kestrels. Great questions. Yeah.
So another question about more recommendation for advocacy. So you had mentioned that grass is very severe.
Yeah.
So obviously not everybody might have the capacity to restore habitat.
Yeah.
So some of the things that we recommend to folks is so turkey stamps and pheasant stamps.
Oh, yeah.
Are required for consuming,
Mhm.
but people can buy them, and all the money that goes from the purchase of those stamps goes into grassland projects or state-owned properties. So
Yeah.
if you're interested in helping grassland species, but maybe don't have the property to do it,
Mhm.
buying a pheasant stamp or a turkey stamp is an easy way to do that. And also talking to the legislature, going through spring hearing process.
Yeah.
You know, to restore the goals of Nelson, because that is the funds that we use to procure properties.
Yes.
Across state. So it's been a couple things for folks to maybe think about there too.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those online that might not have heard, yeah, just turkey stamps and pheasant stamps support grassland birds, not just turkeys and pheasants, and you don't need to use them, you can buy them. But that is one of the main ways that especially the DNR, or specifically the DNR, is able to provide and maintain habitat for grassland birds. And then also getting involved in your local legislature, like Knowles Nelson, or like advocating for the return of Knowles Nelson so that the DNR may be able to purchase and protect habitat specifically for grasslands, because that is their main way to do so. If you don't have the property to restore habitat, or the funds to restore habitat, or your property is in use for something else, or it doesn't fit, you know, like those are all ways to get involved that don't necessarily require you to have land or, you know, even financial resources to be able to interact with and protect these birds and these habitats. Is that a good paraphrase? Okay, great. Any other questions about Kestrels or Southern Wisconsin Birds Alliance? Let me just scroll through to make sure. Okay. Anybody online? I'm reading, I'm paying attention. All right, well, I'll stick around for a while. Sorry again for being a little bit late, and I really appreciate y'all's flexibility and patience with me.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes. Thanks, Jen. So those of that have been around for a while, we used to have a raptor rehabilitator in Dodge County named Barb Harvey, and she did a lot with raptors that had been displaced, and so I came across Barb. I had a power pole that I had a wood duck box on, and we had a storm. This was 25, 30 years ago. And they had to come replace the post. And lo and behold, there were some young kestrels in that box. So I called her and I said, hey, we go, what to do with these kestrels? She says, oh, just put the box up on a new pole. She says, if you're interested, I'll come band them, So I kind of described on what condition they were and everything, and she checked out them. They're all good. And so over the years, I built a rapport with Barb, and every time I was really fortunate for probably the first 15 to 20 years of owning my farm there. I had kestrels just about every year. And so I would have Barb come out and band them. And then one of the boxes that I had, it was on the side of a silo. And it was up there like 18 feet up. And so when it come time to band, and by that time Barb was in her mid to late 60s. She says, I don't climb anymore. So, get your ladder, go on up there, go fetch him, kiddo. And I says, so, and she handed me a paper bag. Okay. She says, yeah, just go up there and, put them in a paper bag. I says, well, how do I grab them? She says, don't worry about it. They'll grab you. And sure enough, you open up the box, and you put your hand in there, and the first one that was on top or just latched onto you, and then you kind of shook them off your hand into the paper bag, and and just this, and then the adults are flying around and click, 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 and the young ones are just screaming, this cacophony of sound, and you finally got them all in a bag, and you went down and Barb, looked them over and put bands on them. But that's kind of one of my fond memories. And I've never been pinched that hard in my life. Baby kestrels. Oh, wow. Without drawing blood. Oh, man, that was, yeah, you just stick your hand in there and they'd like that perfect, they're on their back with the talons, and so you just put it in there and they latch on you and you shake them off. And so that was my encounter with kestrels. For a number of years, I had a video camera in one of the boxes. When it was close enough, I could hook it up. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to see what the kestrels are eating. My particular kestrels, the ones that I had, ate a lot of birds. And I thought, oh, I'll get to see what they're eating. By the time the birds got to the box, the male had generally decapitated the bird and had it already picked. So all you saw was just like this feet and this naked bird that was coming into the box. And then depending upon the stage of the young, the female either ripped it apart and then gently, kind of fed each one of them. And as that progressed, she may just rip off a piece and just leave it for the ones to get. And then towards the tail end, they just dump anything right in the hole, and then they all fought over it and ripped it apart. And once those young fledged, man, was it a noisy yard for a long time, because the adults would fly over with prey and call to the young, and the young had to come and catch up to the adults to get the prey. And they may fly around the yard a couple times, and all of a sudden they'd land on a granary or a barn or something, and then the young could catch up, and then they had to tear it apart and eat it themselves. So cool little birds. For the last couple years, I have not had any kestrels on my property. We had some hanging around this year. I thought perhaps would use a box. I actually put a box out on a power pole about 12, 15 feet up. I know they like it, boxes that are higher. They hung around, but nobody really nested. So I don't know. The last confirmed nesting I had was probably 3 or 4 years ago. That was in a wood duck box on the other end of my property. I think 1 year I actually had 2 pair. One was on our silo in our yard, and I had another pair on the other end of the farm, which is about a half mile, in a wood duck box. That was about as close. But I had just established um, 40+ acres of prairie a year or two prior to that. So there was certainly a lot of habitat right there. So that's my little interaction with kestrels over the years. Yeah, cool little birds. So with that, we're gonna say goodbye. One thing I do want to mention, the next meeting will be held at the Blue Heron Landing. So it'll be the third Thursday. We've got a boat tour scheduled. It's going to take off at 5:30, and that is going to be for club members. If you would like to go on the trip, you can join the club there at that time. And 5:30, we'll have further details in our upcoming newsletter, or contact us through Facebook or however. But Troy and Jodell have donated a trip to the bird club for our May meeting. So with that, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you later.